Welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest, and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran explaining to millennials in a bar entirely too loudly how Freddie Mercury used to stack his vocal harmonies, or else a scrappy upstart copying and pasting vocal parts to create a doubling effect, this is your show. Because ultimately, it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey guys, it's the last Friday of December 2018. I think I got the year right this month. Got it wrong last month. I'm glad that you're here. Thanks for being here. Thanks to everyone who came out to hear me play in Colorado last month. What a state that's become for live music. When I first started playing there about, let's say, a decade ago, you'd just play Denver and then you'd move on to Salt Lake City. Now, there's such a culture of going out to see live music across that state. You can pretty much sit tight there for a week playing shows in Colorado. Colorado Springs, Boulder, Fort Collins now, and of course all the bluegrass and folk festivals that they host over the summer. What an amazing state for live music. They also recently legalized recreational marijuana, so coincidence? I'm not sure. Also, thank you to everybody who came out to hear me play in Chicago, the town that's always been my most supportive base. Thank you. You know, it's pretty cool. I haven't put out an album in a very long while because I've been going through some pretty significant family changes over the last few years. And yet everyone still is coming out to all these shows as strong as they ever have. And it's really allowed me to just burrow down and write this new album the way that it needed to be written and record it the way that it needed to be recorded. And that's all wrapped up now, and it happened because of your support. And I just cannot say it enough times. I can't repeat it enough to tell you how appreciative I am, how grateful I am, how humbled I am by that. So thank you. Thank you for supporting. Oh, yeah, and then I closed out the month. I want to thank everyone who came out to the Winter Classic in Philadelphia, the festival that Strand of Oaks puts on. It was 3 nights of, getting to play tunes, getting to listen to Tim play his songs, getting to listen to Carl Brommel play his songs. I wish I was as good at anything as Carl Brommel is at playing the guitar. I'd never seen him play live before with My Morning Jacket or otherwise, and it was absolutely transcendent. Did we find some time for Carl to sit down with me and unburden himself to the Working Songwriter podcast? Maybe we did. You'll have to stay tuned to this program over the next few months to find out. Hey, if you'd like to hear some of my music live in the coming months, I'm still sussing out my calendar for February. So there will certainly be some shows, but the only thing that we have locked in and confirmed is the Turf Club in St. Paul, Minnesota on February 16th. And we'll be doing a bunch of shows around that as well, so keep your eyes peeled. But if you live in the Twin Cities, for sure, I'm coming to see you on the 16th of February. If you enjoy this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a few things that you could do to help out. First of all, you could become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. Patreon is a website that helps you directly support creative endeavors that you find meaningful. You just head to their site, Patreon, Patreon. You search for The Working Songwriter or you search for my name, and then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month for the show. It's basically a voluntary subscription, a subscription that you don't have to pay, but that you choose to because you dig the show and you're not going to miss the price of a cup of coffee every month or whatever it would be. And over there, you can also grab a sweet Working Songwriter t-shirt designed by none other than Pearl Rachinsky, at Pearl Jr. on Instagram if you want to see her other designs. And over there, you can also listen to all the bonus content I've been posting. We have the first episode of the Working Songwriter Alumni Show with BJ Barham of American Aquarium. There's the 2 live shows that I did in New York with Birds of Chicago and Strand of Oaks. There's an Ask Me Anything that I did in August. And just a few days ago, I posted the second episode of The Oaks Chamber with Tim Showalter. Did we have an extended conversation about a roller skating rink in the middle of Nebraska where I saw a marquee advertising a double bill of buck cherry and fuel? Perhaps we did. But it's a question that you'll only be able to truly answer over there at Patreon. So please join us over there. And if you're not able to contribute in that way, totally understandable. I would just ask that you please leave us a review in iTunes, which is totally free, or even freer than that. Tell a friend who you think would dig the show. Please help us spread the word. Okay. That's the harassment for this month. I hope you guys had a great holiday. This episode, I've known Jesse Dayton for a few years now, dating back to when I used to live in Austin, Texas. I used to see him playing around town. And man, as I think you'll hear just from him talking, he's just an old school type of musician and songwriter. And I think that's because even though he's a few decades younger than a lot of these old timers he's going to tell you about here, he spent a lot of time in their presence, soaking in their essence. And now in this day and age, he's really one of a kind. So thank you to Jesse for giving this episode a second pass with me, since I totally blew it the first time around and failed to record our conversation. Way to go, Joe. People are only volunteering their time and their goodwill, so not a big deal if you honor that or not, apparently. But this time around, we did honor it. We got it right. We recorded it. I recorded it. Jesse gave us a second chance. Thank God for that, and thank Jesse for that too. And that's it. I hope you guys enjoy this month's episode. Peace. My guest this month is originally from Beaumont, Texas, and got his start playing Zydeco, country music, and blues, sneaking into clubs as a teenager to play. 3 decades into his career, Jesse Dayton is the epitome of a working songwriter. After working his way into the studios of Houston, where a regional record label, Starday Records, had built a scene for country music, he began touring clubs and theaters in Texas with his own band. His debut album in 1995 featured guest appearances by musical luminaries Doug Sahm and Flaco Jimenez. A chance meeting with Chris Christopherson on the set of a Nashville television show led Jesse into the world of session guitar work. He would go on to record as a guitarist for Waylon Jennings, Johnny Cash, Ray Price, Willie Nelson, Johnny Bush, and Glenn Campbell. And since country music wasn't the only genre he was exposed to growing up, somehow Joe Strummer and The Clash managed to corrupt him along the way. He's also spent some time on the road performing with a host of punk icons such as John Doe, the Super Suckers, and X. In a strange turn of events, the musician and film director Rob Zombie found Jesse's music and personally approached him to write and record the soundtrack to his film, The Devil's Rejects. He would later go on to write music for Zombie's movie Halloween 2 and appear in that film in the role of Captain Clegg. All the while, he's maintained a cult following for his live club shows in Europe and the U.S., touring robustly through the year with his trio. American Songwriter magazine has said that he's fighting the good fight by fanning the flames of pure, unvarnished Americana. The Austin Chronicle calls him a Renaissance country rocker, and Rolling Stone has noted that the single Charlottesville from his new record maintains a world-wearied perspective but clings fiercely to a message of optimism. I caught up with Jesse on Christmas Eve just a few days ago between sessions for his new album. Now, I think we owe people something of a backstory to this conversation that we're about to have, and I need to come clean. Over the summer, you drove your massive tour bus to the street where my parents live. What is that thing that you tour in, by the way? What is that bus that you have there?
Okay, so we did a 15-passenger van forever. I put like 500,000 miles on 3 of those vans, right? Wow. And everyone was like, "You need to get a Sprinter, dude." But I went on Joe Ely's RV one time, and he had bunks on it like a bus. So it's not like a camper RV. It's more of what they call an A-class RV, which resembles more of a bus. It's got slide out. So it's technically an RV, but it's just like a bus on the inside. You got a lounge, you got the bus bunks with the curtains and the TVs in them and all that kind of stuff. So we kind of get around the cost of having a bus by having that.
Did you buy the RV and then retrofit it, or do you buy it with that configuration in it?
I had them put that stuff in.
Gotcha. And you can drive it without a CDL, like you don't need a driver to get around?
Anybody can drive it. And it's, you just got to be careful going around the turns because it's super long and you will hit something. But other than that, it's awesome, man.
Well, long story short, this monster bus shows up on my parents' quiet suburban street where in their basement I've built a studio, and you were nice enough to come over and record an interview. And you come in, you meet my folks, you're very cordial and charming, of course, and we go down. And before the interview, I tell you very glibly how I totally muffed a Richard Thompson interview and was unable to record it. And we have a big laugh about that. And then we have an awesome conversation for an hour, and you leave. And I realize that I've done exactly the same thing. So.
And I was like kind of in awe of that because I love Richard Thompson.
Yeah.
Well, as a guitar player, there's not many guys out there that play guitar like that and write songs on that level. And I was just kind of like, wow, bet he felt kind of bad about that. And then, so when you call me up, I remembered that conversation. You're like, "Hey, dude, it didn't record." And I was like, "Joe, it's okay. Get off the ledge right now." Okay?
To your credit, you were immediately nice about it. And then last week we were supposed to record, and I came down with norovirus. So my point is, if something happens during the interview today, I think I just have to go out back and just fall on a samurai sword at this point and just end it. You know what I mean?
If anything happens today, we will know that the universe does not want us to podcast.
So, hey, last week you were in the studio. What are you up to? What record are you working on right now?
Man, I did 2 solo, like all original records, like back to back. And so I just told the label, I said, "Hey, we've been on tour for like 4 years straight. I got some songs, but I don't really want to rush anything out. Can I do a record of cover songs?"
Okay.
And they were like, "Yeah, we think that's great." And I was shocked that they were excited about it because it's going to give me more time to kind of focus on the original record, not rush anything out,
It's so critical to have projects like that work a different part of your brain while you writing the original material and doing like a tentpole album like that, like a real LP, it takes so long to write, and yet you got to keep on working in the interim. You know what I mean?
You got to keep working. And, it's kind of, I'm excited about doing this record because it's something different and it's joyful and it's, I'm reinterpreting these songs to the way I would do them. And I mean, I think there's only 2 songs that we're doing that are kind of close to the original.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing a Gordon Lightfoot song. But it sounds closer to like, say, a Waylon 70s song, but it's still, it's still got the same thing. So
what are you learning right now? I mean, I'm assuming, what are you learning going in with other people's material right now? How is it changing your process? Are you able to be more clear-eyed and objective about the songs than you would about your own ones? Or or are you more protective of the legacy of those songs? How is it different than doing your own material?
Well, it is different in terms of like kind of wanting to protect the, because I love these songs. That's why I wouldn't be doing songs that wasn't totally crazy about. So I am trying to protect the integrity of the songs. But one thing I'm learning a lot is just, and I never stop learning, it's just how awesome the way songwriters' minds work. Like for instance, the Gordon Lightfoot. I've been a huge Gordon Lightfoot fan. All my life, but in the 90s, when I played with Waylon, everybody thinks that those outlaw guys were riding around listening to Hank Williams 24/7, but really they were listening to songwriters. They were listening to Neil Young, and he had a big hit with "Are You Ready for the Country" by Neil Young, and he was listening to Gordon Lightfoot, and they were looking for songs. So, when I listen to these songs, when you record something, you really get it deep inside it, and you realize, oh, wow, that's amazing that they did that right there on that key change. Or, it's like, that's crazy that's as simple. I thought it was harder than that. So really what I've learned is the revealing of these guys' songwriting process. And man, is it a huge, crazy influence. Like I walk around, trying to have a dinner conversation with my wife or whoever. And I'm like, in my back of my mind, I'm going, I can't believe all that chord change was a D to E.
That's it, man. No, seriously, like that stuff, when you get under the hood with it and you see how simple it is. I was talking to the guy who's producing my record right now, and we were going over some songs, and I had a song that I thought was too simple. And he was like, let me show you what a song is. And he just played one chord on the guitar, and he goes, "Love Me Tender." He's like, right there? That's like, you already know what song that is. That's almost the whole song right there. And it's just that first lyric.
Crazy.
And they got it right. And if they tried to add anything to it, it would have been trash.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy. So there's a discipline and a very kind of heavy depth to being simple. And, and of course everyone knows, well, keep it simple, children's rhymes and nursery rhymes and stuff like that. They all kind of sound like big pop songs. Yeah, we've all heard that a million times. But let's don't write it off to be that simple. The real genius about it is that you're putting such a heavy, deep emotional feeling into something that's so simple. That's where the real genius comes in.
I think so too. I think a lot about basketball players when I think about that, because I listen to lyricists, and I'm not going to, bring up anybody's name here because I don't want to. I think there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, but I don't like it, these 3-syllable words, these $10 words, showing me that all these different parts of the thesaurus. Like, it reminds me of a basketball player coming down the court and trying to do something flashy with the ball rather than a Dwayne Wade would come into a game and just quietly score 25, grab, 9 rebounds and 6 assists and wins the game. You know what I mean? And that's the type of songwriting that I like.
Yeah, I do too. And, I think that's the kind of the blessing of these songwriters usually not being instrumentalists or guitar players.
Exactly.
I think, because that would get in their way. It would get, it's like, I'm a fan of the Dylan record with Mark Knopfler on it.
Yeah.
But I couldn't imagine every record being like that.
No.
You know what I mean? So, I don't know. I think your limitations sometimes are your greatest strength.
Well, you brought up earlier, we were talking about Richard Thompson, and you said it's so rare that you can have a guitar player at that level who's also a songwriter. And that's why it's rare, I think. That's why most of the time you're in the studio with a songwriter and you're asking them, like, what key is this in? And they're like, well, here's the chords. I don't know what key it's in, but there's F and there's A minor and there's, and you have to figure it out.
Right.
That limitation is great. Now, I don't think I'm that. I have a pretty good understanding of not that I'm a great player, but I kind of understand music theory to a certain degree. You're certainly a player and a songwriter as well. How do you use your playing? How do you keep that playing out of the way when you're writing a song?
Well, I write everything on an old, cheap, banged up acoustic guitar in my house. And I have Martins. I have very nice, vintage, expensive guitars. But most of the time, I'll grab this little Silvertone guitar, and it kind of forces me to play things in a simple way. Because when I'm writing a melody, or I'm thinking about like some crazy lyric thing that I heard, I try to keep that playing out of there, because, you know, this is the deal with players. And this is the problem that I found, because I started out playing all kinds of old music and, you know, old country and rockabilly and blues and Cajun stuff, Zydeco and all that stuff. You know, that's all great, man. I love that stuff. Definitely not saying anything negative, but a lot of that stuff that didn't make it out of those genres because the songs weren't really there. And at some point, you know, if you get a bunch of great players in a room and they don't have a good song between them, they're worthless. You know, you get, unless you're just into noodling and jamming, as they call it, which, you know, I am to a certain degree. I mean, hey man, I like Jerry. You know, I like this. I like the psychedelic Miles stuff in the '60s. You know, I can get out there and go out there and live out on the edge for a little bit, but I'm waiting for a song.
Yeah, man. You know, I was just in the studio in Nashville, and we had these great guys, you know, like Dennis Crouch, the bass player, amazing bass player, players on that level. They were all great. And I noticed with the material that I was bringing in, obviously some material stronger than other stuff. And they would bring to life the good songs, and then the songs that were B minuses. I mean, they couldn't do anything with it. And you really realize that, man, the coin of the realm when you get into the studio is material. And that's it. That is it, man.
That's the only thing. I mean, that's why I didn't want to rush this next record out, because I did have enough songs. I'm always walking around with 12, 15 songs, because that's what I do, you know? And sometimes one song that I'm not that crazy about will get me to the next song that I am crazy about, or that everybody else is crazy about, or that everybody else says, no, dude, you need to record that song. And I'm like, because I'm so close to it, I have no, you know, kind of overview, or I'm way too close to it. So a lot of times I'll just sit down, you know, with one of the guys in the band or my wife or whoever, and I'll say, hey man, I wrote this new song, check it out. And sometimes they'll go, uh-huh. And then sometimes they'll go, oh my God, dude, that's the one. You know what I mean? So,
right.
But I have zero perspective, you know?
No, I know what you mean. And it's important to have people in your life that don't just, I mean, look, they're not going to sit down and tell you to your face, like, that's a terrible song. And that's kind of counterproductive from them to say it that way. But like you said, you do know the difference between when someone's like, yeah, man, it's good. And, oh, yeah. Oh, that's the thing. You know, it's, man, nothing's worse than playing a song for somebody and just having them go like, yeah, it's good.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what? It happens. And, you know, it happens to, you know, Paul McCartney. I mean, it happens to the best of the best. You know, every song you write can't be just, you know, people think when, I'm a huge, you know, Clash fan. Well, you know, think about all the songs that Joe Strummer wrote that didn't make those records.
Right.
That we've never heard before. I mean, I'm not trying to drop names here, but I have to give people some kind of reference. You know what I mean? And you know, you just don't know what people have written. So,
well, let's give people a reference here, because since we've been talking, you've kind of name checked some of that older stuff that you used to play, like the Zydeco and the Old Country, and you've dropped, a reference to the Clash. So you come from Beaumont, Texas originally, and you kind of grew up with that more traditional country music in your life. That's right?
right. Yeah, absolutely.
So like the Lefty Frizzels of the world, the maybe Porter Wagoner, stuff like that. Yeah.
George Jones was from Beaumont. He went to high school with my dad.
No shit.
And yeah. So, and they had a big, they had a huge, recording scene in Beaumont, because they had this record label called Star Day Records.
Okay.
And, so in the 50s, all these great producers from Memphis and Nashville and New Orleans, they were all going down to Beaumont and recording these, like they recorded Joe LeBlanc the first time in Beaumont, and it sold like 1 million copies. And then they found George Jones and, thought he was going to be a rockabilly star because he did White Lightning, but he turned into be, the greatest country music singer probably of all time.
I'll second you on that.
And yeah, I mean, and so Lefty Frizzell came down there, and Johnny Bush and all these guys started recording in Beaumont. So,
that's so strange to me. Why do you think that happened? It just seems like such an out of the way place for these guys to be coming down from Nashville to record at. How do you think that happened?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of different theories. This guy named Pappy Daly, who started, he had a Gulf Coast record distribution company.
Okay. And
so people had to go through him to get their stuff on the radio and to get their stuff in the stores. So all these big markets like New Orleans and Houston and, Mississippi, Alabama, and, Florida and all that. So, and eventually, they started doing their own thing. Now, I'll tell you a crazy thing is there was a guy named Huey P. Moe. And if your listeners look him up, they're going to find some very kind of damaging, crazy, info about this guy.
Huey P. Moe?
Yeah. His last name's Meaux.
Okay.
He was Cajun, full-blooded, like, talk like this, bro, from Louisiana,
Yeah.
We're going to do the Zydeco song.
Yeah.
So he actually got busted later in his life for pedophilia.
Jesus.
And the cops chased him into Juarez, and he went on the run. He was on the run in Mexico. And then they finally found him in Mexico, brought him back, tried him. He went to Huntsville, and he died in prison. But before that, he produced all these hit records. And he was a huge producer. He produced Before the Last Teardrop Falls by Freddie Fender, Wasted Days and Wasted Nights. He produced all that cool Doug Somm stuff.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And so when I was 18, I went over to Houston, and I went to the studio that he was working at in Houston, because I knew his people were all from Beaumont, Louisiana, all that stuff. And I begged him to produce me.
Oh.
And this was like 1985 or something. I was just
now, but hold on. Like, how does the nuts and bolts of that work? Do you just go to the studio and just knock on the damn door and say, I want to talk to Huey P. Moe? Literally.
That's what I did. I literally walked in there, and he was sitting in the office. And I said, "Are you Mr. Moe?" And he said, "Yeah." So I'm Jesse Dayton. I'm from Beaumont, Texas. And I'm a guitar player and a singer and a songwriter. And I'm a big fan. And he kept telling me no. But I came back like 3 more times. And the 4th time I came back, he goes, "Look, I'm going to put you on a recording session." And so he put me on a Rockin' Dopsy. And Rockin' Dopsy was the guy that had the hit song, "Don't Mess With My Toot Toot."
Okay. Okay. Not familiar, but okay.
Yeah, it's like the biggest Zydeco song ever. Like, It sold millions of copies, like, worldwide. And but I didn't play on that song, but I did get to play on a session with that guy, and that kind of got my foot in the door.
Was that intimidating?
Yeah, it was scary at first, but I knew I was good. I'd been playing clubs nonstop since I was 15. You know, when you learn all those country songs and all those classic rock songs and all those blues and exotic, you know, you kind of know music. So you're like, you know, the only thing you're intimidated by are the people that you're playing with. You're not really intimidated by the music.
So were you able to hang in that session, and did they bring you back for more work?
Yeah. I went and did. I ended up doing 3 songs, and they got on the record. And you know, it was a weird thing, and then that kind of started it.
What was his producing style like? Were you guys all cutting live, and what was he like, a domineering producer? What was it like?
No, he wasn't. He wasn't a domineering person, but he had to have everybody cutting at the same time, vocals, everything. So there was no click track. In fact, I remember the drummer going, "I am the click track," because I was like, I was the only white kid on the whole section, and Huey was white too. And these are all black guys from like Crowley and Church Point and all these little Louisiana towns. So, but it was amazing. And, you know, Zydeco is a very simple thing, but it's very rhythmical. I always tell guitar players, they go, man, if you really want to learn how to play rhythm guitar really good, play along with James Brown. I'm like, well, that's true. But if you really want to play the drums on the guitar, play Zydeco. Because it's so syncopated. You know, it's...
So from that session, did that session earn you the right to record some stuff of your own, or did you just become like a session player for him, or what happened?
Well, I played on some other stuff for him, and then that got me some free time. So I would go in the middle of the night, the classic middle of the night story.
That's how I made my first record. Yep.
Yeah, and I cut a record, and then, you know, I just started playing. It started happening, and then he got busted, and you know, none of us knew that any of that was going on.
Wow.
That he was so like crazy. And anyway, so we, you know, then I got, you know, because of the country background, when I got to Austin, you know, everybody sounded like Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Right.
You know, all the guitar players did. And I love Stevie Ray Vaughan. I get it, you know, but that wasn't my thing. So I would be like playing the Continental or the Black Cat or whatever with my little band, doing my Jerry Reed imitations. And that kind of got me those gigs, you know.
Who was on the scene in Austin at that time that you looked up to?
There was a band called the Wagoneers that I loved, and they had gotten a big record deal with A&M Records, and they had just went out and bought all new Manuel nudie suits.
Oh boy.
Yeah, this was like the late 80s. There was a band called Two Hoots and a Holler, probably the best name for a three-piece band ever.
Yeah.
And they were amazing. They were like punk and rockabilly. And then there were all these other people that, you know, were becoming who they were going to be. I mean, you know, Charlie Sexton was around, and you know, Joe Ely.
Charlie Sexton kind of began as like a solo artist, going for almost like a pop new wave sound, right? Is that what he was doing at the time?
He made when I first saw Charlie, he was actually opening up for the Clash. Oh wow! And he had a rockabilly band called Little Charlie and the Eager Beaver Boys. So yeah, so we were for me. He's always been like Charlie. For most of the rest of us, we grew into who we would be, but I think Charlie just came out of the womb looking cool and playing
looking
guitar.
Cool and slaying. Yeah, that's his MO for sure.
Yeah. So now he plays for Bob Dylan.
And has for many years, right? Like 20 years?
For a very long time. Yeah, a very long time. But there's so many great guitar players in Austin. I mean, what happened with me was this guy named Clifford Antone, who owned Antone's Blues Club. He came down and saw me at Beaumont at this dive called the Boulevard. And my brother, who went to school with him at UT, because Clifford's family's from right by Beaumont, so we knew their family. He was like, "Hey, this guy's coming to see you tonight. It's a big deal." And I was like, "Oh," I was a kid. So we saw him pull up in the parking lot, big Lincoln Continental. So I ran inside. I said, "Let's play Matilda." And we got the dance floor going. There's probably 30 people there. Everybody's dancing. Clifford walks in with this bodyguard named Sugar Bear. And the guy's like 6'8". It's like this big black dude who looks straight out of Central casting from a 70s blaxploitation.
Okay.
Like Huggy Bear looking kind of guy. And so he comes up, he watches 3 songs. He comes up to me, he goes, and he looks really mafioso. He's a Lebanese guy, but he looks like, pretty, intimidating cat. He's like, "Hey, come out to my car, kid." So I go out to his car. He opens the trunk up, and there's shag carpet and lighting, tube lighting all through it. And in his truck, he's got all these records. And it's like a record store in there.
What kind of car was it? Was it like a limo?
It was a black Lincoln Town car.
Okay.
It was a limo, full on limo. And so he goes, "Hey, Sugar, get him the Muddy record and the Buddy Guy record." He gave me like 5 blues records. They were all original. I still got them, by the way.
Wow.
And he said, "Hey, kid, learn these songs, learn these records, and call me, and I'll get you up. I love guitar players. I'll get you up on the stage at the club." And for a Beaumont kid to go to Austin and play at Antone's, I was like, okay, if I do that, that's
I'm set.
Yeah, I'm set. So anyway, I finally do that. Call him like 2 months later. He gets me up on stage, and after we get done, he goes, "You're a little more country than I thought you were." He goes, "I'm going to take you over here to the Broken Spoke and introduce you to James White."
Okay.
So he got me up on stage with Alvin Crowe. So the first night I ever played in Austin, I played 2 songs at Antone's and 2 songs at the Broken Spoke the same night.
Wow. I feel like the career trajectory you're talking about right now you're like, I'm a guy that plays guitar. Club owners can come see me and I can go play at their spot and there's an audience that comes there. Like, does that career trajectory even exist anywhere for people? I mean, it's
I know,
crazy.
isn't it weird? It really is weird. And I said, like, we played the other night in Austin for the first time in a while because we've been on tour. And I said, "Oh, it's good to be back in Austin where guitar playing still matters."
Yeah.
And I mean that, not that it doesn't matter everywhere else, but I've got a 22-year-old kid, Joe. I mean, they're not freaking out about the same stuff that we freaked out about. Nor did we freak out about the same stuff as our parents, but it was definitely more in line and closer than it is now.
Yeah, I don't know about that actually, because my musical taste was pretty close to my old man's. So I think I'm kind of an anomaly in that way. Sounds like you, to a certain degree, might have been too. But yeah, I see what people are listening to now, and I think to myself, like, cool. Well, what I'm playing, I play kind of like folk music. It's like, this is kind of like what jazz music is. Like, there's a certain subsect of people that are super into this, and that's where I'll make my living. But it's never going to be. I have no, I got a 2-year-old son. I have no illusion that he's going to think it's cool when he's 14 what I do for a living. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm going to seem like such a fuddy-duddy.
Yeah. I make that comparison all the time to jazz.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. Because I play, I have a trio that I tour with, and a lot of times we feel like jazz musicians must have felt, in terms of, we're playing a niche kind of thing. Not that we can't open our arms to the world with a great song. Anyone's capable of it if you got the right song.
Absolutely.
Which I think this kind of the thing that keeps us around. It keeps pulling us back in.
Well, you just you think that, all right, if you're Dave Brubeck, probably the world at large doesn't care what you're doing. But then one day you just happen to record take 5. And all of a sudden, now everybody cares. So yeah, like that's certainly the white whale that I think we're all kind of chasing in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
It never fails to amaze me what humble enterprises independent record labels are. I guess what's particularly fascinating is that, given how small their operations tend to be, how disproportionately vast their cultural impact can be. Sun Records out of Memphis was such a shoestring business in the beginning that its proprietor, Sam Phillips, had to make extra money by recording weddings and funerals. That's how it was for the label that gave us Elvis, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Johnny Cash. Visiting Ian MacKay's Discord house in Arlington a few months back, I was struck by how streamlined and skinny the operation actually was. This is a label that's sold into the millions of records and that has sparked an entire global subculture of hardcore. And yet, it's just run out of a normal suburban house with a rehearsal space in the basement and a 10 by 15 office in the back where he fulfills orders personally. The label that's released most of my records over the years, Lightning Rod Records, has been a home to Jason Isbell, James McMurtry, Amanda Shires, Billy Joe Shaver. I mean, that's a pretty healthy roster, and yet the label is basically just one man, Logan Rogers, who runs all the day-to-day operations, hires subcontractors, and, to his great credit, whenever I run out of product on the road, tirelessly makes drives over to his storage space to pick me up some more vinyl and mail it to whichever far-flung hotel I'm crashing at that night. I guess I got to thinking about all this when Jesse mentioned Star Day Records, the independent label out of Beaumont, and what really caught my ear was that they brought the world, for the first time, the music of George Jones. Some regional distributorship out of Beaumont gave us the Possum, gave us No Show Jones, the greatest country singer of all time. I was intrigued and I started to do some digging. Just listen to this account from a publication called Both Sides Now, and it was authored by David Edwards, Mike Callahan, and Patrice Iries. The Star Day label was started in Beaumont, Texas in 1952 by Pappy Daly and Jack Starnes Jr. Pappy Daly started working as an accountant in the tax department of the Southern Pacific Railroad. When the Depression came, Daly started looking for other work. He wrote to the Bally Manufacturing Company in Chicago and asked why Houston, Texas had no distributor for Bally's jukeboxes. Bally's wrote back and offered him the territory. He started South Coast Amusements in 1932 to distribute Bally jukeboxes. Eventually, he became a wholesaler and distributed records in the southwestern U.S. In 1952, he started the Star Day record label with Jack Starnes. Jack Starnes was a talent booker who owned a nightclub in Beaumont and who at one time managed Lefty Frizzell. In 1954, a young ex-Marine named George Jones played in Starnes' club. Starnes decided to cut some records with Jones and brought in Daly to help produce his first session. The records were cut in Starnes' living room on a Magnacord home recorder. In 1955, he recorded his first hit entitled Why Baby Why, which went to number 4 on the country charts. So there you have it. Those humble beginnings never cease to amaze me. From a call to a jukebox distributorship to recording the greatest country singer of all time in your living room on a tape recorder. That's how life can lay itself out sometimes. And if that's not miraculous, I don't know what is. Take me to, so we've been talking about you're making your way up through Beaumont and then recording sessions in Houston and then these iconic clubs in Texas. And take me from there to the next phase of your career, which I know about, which is in the 90s when you become a player that older iconic songwriters like Waylon and Johnny Cash, they start using you in sessions. Like, how did you get from point A to point B there?
Well, the whole Cash thing was a kind of a fluke. He had been recording down in Houston with a guy that I knew. So I think I was on his radar, but I ended up, I was playing the Continental Club one night, and this woman came out named Evelyn Schreiber. And Evelyn Schreiber was a very big music business person in Nashville, really respected. She was like the president of MCA for a while, and she was a publicist to the Highwaymen.
Okay.
And she came out and saw me, and she came up to me after the set. And she goes, "I definitely can't get you on country radio, but I'd love to get you on a TV show just so people could see you." And I was like, "Great," So she calls me like 2 weeks later, and she's like, "Listen, we're going to put you on this show called Crook and Chase," which was this kind of square show that they had for the Nashville network. But it was a national country music show. It was the only one they had.
Is this like kind of like a Good Morning America, but for the Nashville channel or something like that?
Yeah, but it was, exactly. And it was in the evenings.
Oh, okay.
And all the big country stars played on it. I mean, everybody was on it. And so she gets me on there. I drive this beat up truck to Nashville. Such a cliche, but it's like the way it happened.
Sure.
And I check into the Motel 6 because I couldn't afford to stay, because I wasn't on a record label or anything. I couldn't afford to stay close to the scene, to Music Row and all that stuff. So they had a limo pick me up at a Motel 6, and I was like, that was a huge lesson for me about the smoke and mirrors of like,
oh yeah,
it's like the irony of having a limo driver come to a place where I was paying $23 a night to stay.
That's a trip.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. And by the way, riding in a limousine is creepy if you're by yourself.
Well, I think in general, limousines are kind of a thing of the past. Don't they seem just like really dated? And like, if I was doing business with someone and they showed up in a limousine in the year 2018, I'd be like, that's a weird motherfucker right there.
You'd be freaked out, dude. Yeah. You'd be so freaked out.
But at the time they were big,
Yeah. At the time it was a big deal. And I'm way too working class for that. But I go there and I practice my song with the band. And of course they won't let me have my own band. So it's all these guys with mullets and like these Hawaiian shirts on and these really bad Garth Brooks print kind of stuff. And I'm there and I got, pompadour, sideburns and tattoos. And I'm like a duck hanging around all these, swans,
Yeah.
And so anyway, so right before I go on, Evelyn knocks on my backstage, on my dressing room door and says, "Hey, I want to introduce you to Chris Christopherson. He's going to be on the show tonight."
My God.
And I was like, wow, that was cool. At least he was super nice and asked me where I was from and told me where he was from and very laid back. And I thought to myself, well, this is probably going to be pretty cheesy. So at least I got to meet Chris Christopherson.
Right.
So I did my song. He did his song. They call him to the couch. He gets me a round of applause and says, "Hey, everybody, how about Jesse Dayton from Beaumont? He was really good." And so he walks off stage and I walk up to thank him and he goes, "Hey man, do you want to go to the Gibson Guitar Factory?" and I was like, well, it's like 10 o'clock at night. He says, "That's all right, Hoss. They'll open it up for us."
Yeah. Well, I was going to go back to the Motel 6, but I guess I can make some time for the Gibson Guitar Factory.
Exactly. So me and him and Evelyn Schreiber go to the Gibson Guitar Factory and we smoke a joint on the way. And Chris was talking about my favorite writers. He's talking like Bukowski and Hunter S. Thompson and these people that he actually knew.
Wow.
Or had met, and and he, when you find, back then especially, I think when I found another guy, I was like, wow, you're a reader too. All right. You know what I mean? Like,
Now, what's it like to be there because for me, I'm not really a weed smoker. I don't know about you, but I've been in situations where I meet someone that I really admire. They pull out a joint. Then I get really stoned and I have a hard time kind of hanging. Were you cool? You weren't freaked out there? You were good to go?
No, I'm a pretty good weed smoker. I don't smoke near as much as I used to, but I was one of those guys who would say, dude, shut up. You're just paranoid. Relax. No one's ever killed himself doing this. I was that guy. You know what I mean? Because I've just been around so many older musicians who smoked it. And I'm way too busy to smoke weed like I used to. But I do like to, if I get everything done, I do like to go out, and have a little puff every once in a while.
Because, sure. So much healthier than alcohol, too.
Yeah. There's no calories and no hangover. I could go on and on. But anyway, so you're there in that limo. I go back to the hotel. I can't go to sleep. Finally go to sleep. Wake up the next morning. Waylon Jennings calls me at my hotel room and says, "Hey, Hoss, I saw you on the TV show last night with Chris.
Wow.
And I cut my hand cooking with Jesse Coulter in the kitchen last night. You want to come down and play some guitar for me?"
Wow. Like his rhythm guitar that he would be playing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I got there and he realized I could play guitar.
Was it a session or a show?
It was a session and it was at Woodland Studios. I looked at the phone for a minute. I was like, couldn't believe it was really him. Cause it's like, it's that voice from, from the TV show.
So Woodland Studios is the place in Five Points that Gillian Welch owns now, right? Like that spot?
Yes. Yeah.
So, and that's when it was just,
she owned it.
Who owned it? Like MCA or something like that? Or
I think some recording like producer, Tony Brown or somebody might've owned it. One of those big guys in Nashville owned it then, but
gotcha.
But they made all kinds of amazing records there. So he told me, he goes, all right, also I'll come down to Woodland Studios and we'll be there in a couple of hours. And I was like, oh my God. So I guess I'm blowing off my plane. I guess I'm blowing off, driving back to Nashville.
Yeah. To Austin.
So
yeah.
So I drove over there and knocked on the door and Johnny Cash opened the door. And check this out. The whole thing's on film. So if your listeners want to check out the footage from the very first day that I met those guys, just go to Google Jesse Dayton, Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings. And there's all this footage of us three hanging out, cutting jokes and playing guitar. And Johnny Cash opened the door and he said, are you going to stand there with your mouth open or come in and play that thing?
Jesus.
And I said, I guess I'm going to come in. He goes, hello, I'm Johnny Cash, just like on the record.
Oh my God. Now wait, so
out,
are they recording a specific record there or are these guys
they were working on a tribute record they were doing because they all guested on each other's records all the time. So there's a Willie tribute record and Waylon was doing I Never Cared for You, which is a kind of out there Willie Nelson song. And, and Cash was there. And anyway, the session went great. I mean, there's actual footage of us working up the song on YouTube because at that time in their career, they had film crews following them everywhere because they were older.
Right.
And they were like, these gods walking the earth and everybody wanted to document it. So, anyway, Waylon tells me, he goes, hey, Hoss, Nicky will get you a check. That was his manager.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, I might call you in a couple of weeks. He goes, I'm making another record.
Okay.
And I was like, yeah, great. So like 3 weeks go by and he calls me up and he goes, hey, I'm making a new record. I'm going to have you and Mark Knopfler and Pete Anderson from Dwight Yoakam's band play guitar on it. And I was like, great. So he flies me to Nashville. I get there and I'm like, where's Mark and Pete? He goes, oh, you're going to play all the guitar on it.
Okay.
And
So when you came up to do that second recording session with him, did you go on to make that whole album? And did you tour with him at all after this, or was it mainly recording stuff?
Well, it was mainly recording stuff. We did play together. We did some shows. But right after we recorded the record, he started not feeling well.
Okay.
And that's when the diabetes and all that stuff kicked in. So his thing changed, but there were some great times, man. I mean, I heard some stories that blow my mind. I mean, just things that, like one time Nikki came in and, one time we're in the recording studio and Waylon walks in and he goes, "Well, Hoss, they want me to do the Lola Falana show."
Okay.
And I'm Lola Falana, isn't that hot, like African-American dancer chick? Like, he goes, "I don't know why everybody thinks it's such a big deal." And he walks out kind of like put out, you know?
Yeah.
And like 5 minutes later, Nikki, his manager, walks in. He goes, "Oh my God, did you guys hear the news?" I go, "What?" "We're playing Lollapalooza." and I mean, just crazy stories. You know, Johnny Cash would come in the studio. Shooter told me they had some kind of argument, falling out for a few weeks, and that they had got back, you know, like friends do. I don't think it was serious, but they had got back together. So they were just hanging out together all the time that I was around. Cash would come over to the studio like every other day, just about.
Well, I mean, it's amazing to think. So I'm talking to you now, and you did a recording session, several, and became friends with Waylon and heard those stories. And his story begins back in the 50s when he's 14 years old. I mean, I believe he was playing bass in Ray Price's band, or
no, Buddy Holly.
On Buddy Holly's band. There you go.
Yeah, he was supposed to be on the plane.
He was supposed to be on the plane out of Iowa.
Yeah, he gave the Big Bopper his ticket, his seat.
So I mean, that's what. That's what I love about playing this type of music, and that's why I don't mind it, you know, kind of narrowing into a more jazz-like type of listenership, because it's, you know, it's a real opportunity to feel like a link in a chain, you know, and I really love that. What was Waylon like to work with in the studio? What did you learn from him as a band leader in the studio?
Well, the thing that a lot of people don't realize about Waylon was he was a master harmony singer.
Okay.
And like he could sing harmonies with himself on the weirdest thing you've ever heard. And he would go, and he never did like more than one take. It was always just, so what I learned from him was listening, having big ears and listening for parts. Because he would say to me, and he would say to the producer or the engineer or whatever, he goes, "Just run that back right there. Let me hear that." And he goes, "Y'all be quiet." And we would listen to it. He goes, "The song is telling us what it wants. We just have to listen to it." Which was kind of code for, don't let your ego get in the way. Don't let you coming up with an idea be more important than what the song actually needs. And that was a huge lesson for me, because sometimes I would just go in and play the most simple thing, back to what we were talking about earlier, and people would freak out, man. People go, "Oh my God, that's amazing." And I was like, yeah, to me, it's really not that amazing. I wanted to do this there and that there. And that got me the gig with Ray Price, and I did the Willie sessions. And,
now hold on, back up there. So at what point did you begin playing with Ray Price?
Well, about 6 months after I did the Waylon record, I got a phone call saying that Ray Price was going to do an orchestra record with the guy Beck, the musician.
Beck? B-E-C-K? Yeah, of course.
His father is a very
he's a string arranger. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a very famous string arranger. And so he was going to make this orchestra record with Ray. And Ray had talked to the producer and Waylon and said, "Hey, man, this guy thinks Jesse Dayton's going to be out in L.A. You should get him to come play on it." So that's what happened. I went out there and I played all the guitar on this Ray Price record, and, got to use, I got to do all kinds of different guitars, gut string and Spanish stuff, and then some real traditional country. And Junior Brown actually played pedal steel.
Really?
On that record. Yeah, which he's not known for. He's known for that
the git
guitar,
steel. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was an amazing thing. Sitting out on Ray Price's bus on Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles. Once again, burning the herb, listening to Sinatra.
He was into Sinatra.
Way into Sinatra.
Really?
Yeah. So people don't realize this, but Sinatra, who sang behind the beat because of Louis Armstrong and because of Bing Crosby, influenced Ray Price, whose mother was Italian. He also grew up on the Texas-Mexico border listening to all those mariachi singers. And he started singing everything behind the beat. And then, of course, Willie played bass for Ray Price, and Willie sang everything way behind the beat.
Yeah.
So it's a weird link that Sinatra has to country music.
Well, all because of my one paisano Italian brothers, Ray Price, bringing it in, huh? Didn't know that about him, that he was part of the Italian Brotherhood here. I love that.
Yeah, his daddy was like a rancher, typical Texas white boy, but his mom was Italian and loved opera.
So what studio were you working out of out there in Los Angeles?
We were at Ocean Way Studios, which was the big one. We were actually recording in the same room where Brian Wilson produced Pet Sounds for the Beach Boys. And I met all kinds of people there. I met the Rolling Stones were making a record across the hall with Don Was. I got to meet all the Stones, and that was the first time I met Don, and I got to work with him later. And
how did you keep your head about you? How did you not just end up face down in a ditch with too much cocaine in your system, man? I would have fucked this whole chance up.
Yeah. Well, I never was really into hard drugs. You know what I mean? And I was too scared to mess everything up to do anything like that. You know what I mean? I was too grateful because I was like, this doesn't really happen to people from Beaumont.
It's pretty unusual for someone at that age, though, to have that understanding, is what I'm saying. I think it's pretty unusual. Well, and it served you well.
I mean, I partied. I blew it out. I mean, there were some guys that I met that I ended up, I would come in the studio sometimes, and, I think the older guys would kind of live vicariously through me.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're like, "Oh yeah, we know that look."
Yeah. Totally. Like when you're on the road and everyone in the band is married and there's one single guy in the band, everyone is just trying to help him out.
That's exactly what it's like. That's exactly what it's like.
What did you learn? What did you learn from Ray Price? What was his vibe in the studio? What were some of the things that you thought to yourself, "Wow, that's a master class that I can really take a page out of his book on"?
Well, I got really nervous before Ray, so I started like really brushing up on chart reading and jazz songs and standards and passing chords. Because Ray, and by the way, I was the only guy. Well, I think Junior did too, but Junior was only there like 1 or 2 days. He was kind of in and out, but I wore a suit to the studio every day.
Really?
I did, because I did it out of respect for Ray, because Ray was so old school.
Was he wearing a suit?
Yes, he was.
Wow.
and he looked amazing. So I felt like, I would walk around like, with the suit, with my tie undone. I felt like I was, making a Sinatra record.
Yeah.
But the things that I learned from Ray were, about the musicality of a singer. Like Ray could say, no, let's drop that down to F, or let's right here, I want to modulate. Like, he wasn't just a guy who could sing, who had a good voice.
Mm.
He was a real musician. You know what I mean? He could go and tell, he would mouth the parts. Hey, right here, I want you to go da 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 da, and you're like, okay.
Wow.
So he was super musical, and I think that's what I learned from him, and also just about being a gentleman. He was such a gentleman and such a class act to be around. You just felt like you were in the presence of like a real, like, no bullshit was going to go down while Ray Price was around.
Man, the first time that I ever felt that with somebody is I was in my early 20s and I did a tour opening for Joe Ely, and I got to be around him.
Wow.
And you know Joe very well. You knew him in his earlier years. You've known him for a long time. I just got to know him when, so he's probably 60 when I got to know him, and he had such gravitas about him and such, the only word I can use to describe it is it was like a preternatural dignity about him. It's just like this dignity that almost felt like gravity, like you could reach out and physically feel the dignity that he had about him. And you get around a man like that and you just think to yourself, I don't know what it's going to take, but I'm going to spend the next 30 years of my life trying to acquire that gravity there, that dignity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly the way it feels. And I felt that being around Ely. But hey, that's great, man. You did a tour with Ely. That must have been great for a.
Yeah, it was.
Where are you originally from?
I was
originally from like Baltimore.
Yeah, I was in Baltimore, but I got my first agent when I was in like Chicago, and they put me on the road with Joe, and he really had a really big effect on. I mean, basically, I saw him, and I saw that you can have a life as a working musician. There's a reason he was the first person I interviewed on this podcast. Like, he is what I consider to be. He is someone that I hold up in the highest regard, and he's someone that I'd like to be like and model myself after.
Yeah.
And it sounds like Ray Price was kind of like that for you.
He totally was. And there was a lot of those guys around who had that kind of vibe, that old school vibe. But I don't think it was a Texas thing, and I don't think it was a country thing, because I've been around other musicians, like a bit like rock and rollers who held, kind of viewed themselves as like that kind of dignity. And I don't think it's any kind of like ego or false pride, or I don't even think it's like them not wanting to be vulnerable. I think it's just a thing that musicians like the jazz guys had it like the best, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
And I don't know. So we're circling back to these themes of what we were talking about earlier, but I think it's that way too, of the way we think, hey, this is a niche thing. This is my music. I'm serious about it. This is.
Can you talk to me a little bit about, because you've done both of these things at a very high level, which is have your own band with your own original material and been a band leader, and then, as you've just spoken to extensively, you've been a player in someone else's band in a larger thing. Can you talk about the dichotomy between those two skill sets that you've had to develop over the last 20 years?
Well, I'll tell you, I met the great guitar player named Waddy Wachtel, who Waddy Wachtel, for the listeners, he was in Keith Richards' solo band, but he played on all of those James Taylor records. He played on Stevie Nicks, all this country, Linda Ronstadt, like Jackson Brown. I mean, Joni Mitchell. He played on all these things. And I met him one night in the studio, and we were talking, and he goes, a buddy of mine said, you have a good solo record out. I was like, oh, thanks, man. And he said, yeah, he goes, it doesn't suck to be Joe Walsh. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, it's great. If you can turn it on and off like Joe does, when you can go play with other people and make it about them, and then play with your own thing and make it about yourself. So I really took that advice into, like I just did some shows with this guy named Ryan Bingham.
Of course, yeah.
And Ryan, I knew Ryan before he was a big star. And he's still the same sweetheart that he was, the guy, talk about a guy who's like totally not affected by winning an Oscar and a Grammy. It's like unbelievable. And he calls me and he goes, hey man, I'm doing these shows with Willie and my guitar player just left. And I go, well, I'm off. And he's like, great. And so I go play guitar for Ryan, and, he's a big deal now. So he pays everybody really well, takes care of everyone, and everything's real first class. And he's playing for like 5,000 people a night. And so when I go and play with somebody like Ryan, I really make it all about them.
Right.
And I love doing that because it takes the pressure off of me, and hopefully I'm taking some pressure off of them, where I'm creating a space that they can be really creative in. And I don't want to step on anybody's toes. I just want to serve the song, and
and because
as long as you do that.
And because you have your own thing, which is this robust thing that you get to do pretty much whenever you want, like it can put you in a place of creative generosity like that. Cause it's like, well, I have my own thing and I can do that anytime, but tonight I'm here to nail the guitar solo for this guy so he can take a mental break for 45 seconds before heading on to the next song. That's rad.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it really is fun, man. And it's really challenging, and it keeps me on my toes. And I end up learning all these things about music that I don't think I would learn if I was just doing my own thing. And then I bring back all this stuff that I learned from these guys into my solo thing. And it's just one big, circle of like creativity.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta continue to learn. And by learning, I mean, you gotta die these little small deaths all the time of, it's amazing to see people coming up that are younger than you. Let's say they're almost like a decade younger than you. And they come out, and I don't want to bring up another basketball analogy, but you imagine you're LeBron James or Dwayne Wade. You've been in the league for 15 years. You have all this experience. You're crushing it. And then you come out one night and some 22-year-old kid runs you off the court. I mean, it's a big thing for the ego to take. But if you don't take a lesson from that and try to steal something from their game in some way, then you're going to ossify all the faster, and you're going to be out of the league before you know it, man.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, man, I'm grateful that I get to play with guys like him.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like 10, 12 years older than he is, but he's an old soul. There's a lot you can learn from people. I learned so much. I have a 22-year-old son. I learn stuff from him all the time. A big part of this, and this is not like, I don't mean this in a schmaltzy kind of Jerry Lewis show businessy. Hey, babe, we just got to keep our feet on the ground,
Yeah.
But I mean that, like, what keeps me grateful is when I get home and I realize, wow, I just got to do that. I just like, I'm never like, oh, I should be further along, or I should be, I don't think, my mind doesn't think like that. I think about creative projects, and then I go, wow, I got to do that, and I got paid for it.
Man, thank you on Christmas Eve of all days. Thank you for taking the time to do this, man. It's always great to talk to you, Jesse. I really appreciate it.
Well, happy holidays to you and your family, and to all your fans too. I really appreciate you having me on the show, man.
Thanks, Jesse. Talk to you soon, man.
Okay. See you, brother.
That's our show for this month. Thank you for listening. Jesse Dayton's latest album is entitled The Outsider, available anywhere that digital music is sold or streamed. Today's episode was mixed by Matt Schuessler. And this episode has been brought to you by associate producer John McGeehan, whose company, Capital for Compassion, specializes in financing for new construction for low-income housing. Their most recent work being the Salvation Army's Rathgaber Center for Women and Children in Austin, Texas. It's also been brought to you by associate producer Vinyl Cup Records of Des Moines, Iowa. They started as a boutique shop on Facebook, and now they have a brick and mortar of their own. If you're looking for a well-curated selection of vinyl with fair prices and excellent customer service, stop by facebook.com/vinylcup. If before we meet again, you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.